Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Welcome to the first official podcast of the 2018 Formula One season. We have the first major story of 2018 breaking presently, and it is that Williams have finalized their driver lineup. For 2018, the Williams cars will be driven by Lance Stroll and Sergey Sirotkin. Robert Kubica had been famously connected to the potential for driving for Williams in 2018 in recent months. He drove the car for a couple of days at the Pirelli test in Abu Dhabi after the last race of 2017. Sirotkin also drove the car during that test. It was clear that Kubica was quick, and it was also clear that Sirotkin was quick. We don't have official times released from Williams regarding the performances of either Kubica or Sirotkin. However, Williams have decided to sign the Russian. Now, this has started a fervent debate, if not all-out fighting, among Formula One fans about why exactly have Williams signed Sirotkin over Kubica. Is it really all to do with money? Now let's look at this. Williams, it's no secret that Williams are in big trouble, financially, performance-wise, and otherwise. Their best season of late was probably 2015, where they had some good performances. They were challenging for pole positions and podiums. However, Williams have still failed to convert any good grid slot into a race victory, all the way back now to 2012, where Pastor Maldonado very luckily won the Spanish Grand Prix. Before that, you have to go back all the way to 2004, where Juan Pablo Montoya won the Brazilian Grand Prix in a Williams. So it has been a very long dry spell for Williams, and they've not consistently been fighting for wins and challenging for championships, really going back to 2002 or so, with Montoya and Ralf Schumacher driving for them, and then of course their last world championship as a constructor goes back to 1997, back in the days of Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Jacques Villeneuve. Be that as it may, Williams, they're still on the grid, they are still trying their best, but their efforts basically have been fruitless for the last decade or so, really decade and a half up to this point. So Williams definitely are in a lean period. Now, signing Sirotkin means that he has the backing of quite a few high-dollar Russian financial firms and other types of commercial ventures. Kubica did not have the same sort of backing. So on the face of it, is this a decision by Williams simply to follow the money rather than to follow the talent? Well, perhaps it's a little inconclusive at this point. There is certainly a very strong argument to be made for the idea that Williams signed Sirotkin for his cash. Now, we can look at the careers of Robert Kubica, we can look at the career of Sergey Sirotkin as well, and Sirotkin has followed a very traditional trajectory up to this point. He has raced in the junior categories, he's raced in Formula 2, he's been a winner in Formula 2, and now he gets his break to try Formula 1. For one of the most storied constructors in the sport's history, Williams Grand Prix Engineering. A whole slew of race wins and world championships, of course, to their name. So for Sirotkin personally, to turn down the opportunity would be asinine. So therefore, he has signed with the team. Looking at the career of Robert Kubica, however, in terms of his rise to Formula One, again, very traditional. He raced in the junior categories, and then eventually he was given that seat by BMW for the 2006 season, made his debut at the 2006 Hungarian Grand Prix, and he did a really good job before he was disqualified, of course. But Kubica definitely proved himself to be a good racer. He proved himself to be a good technical driver in terms of car development. He also proved himself to be a good politician in terms of starting to integrate himself within the overall management of BMW as well as in with the overall management of Formula One. He spent many years in Italy. He's fluent in Italian. He knows how this game is played, does Robert Kubica. So for Kubica to be denied this seat, a couple of questions start to come to mind. Is it related to his performance? Of course, everybody knows about the rally accident that Robert Kubica had at the beginning of 2011. During winter testing for Renault at the time, Kubica had participated in a rally in Italy. He had a big accident. He received very severe injuries to his right arm. It was nearly amputated. However, surgeons were able to save it. Kubica still has his arm, and he has pretty good functionality in it. There were questions leading up to his first tests in 2017 back in Formula One, first of all with Renault and then later with Williams. Would he be able to operate the car given the limited dexterity and limited range of motion that he does have in his right side? That did not appear to be much of a concern. From what I read, there were some adaptations made to the car, but nothing significant. A little bit more padding on the right side of the cockpit just so he could favor that right side a little bit. And I did read, at least in one place, that he was using a single shifter paddle that could upshift and downshift from just one side of the steering wheel. So assumedly he could use his left hand to change gear both up and down if that was more comfortable for him. I don't know if that story is truly verified, but if those were the modifications made to the car, that's not an incredibly difficult thing to do. And if he is still just as quick as he was, I don't see really the drawback to running Kubica over anybody else, really. So if it's not his performance, if it's not his career, then we go back to the idea of, was Sirotkin signed simply for his money? Well, it certainly is a very compelling argument, certainly. However, when we get into this gray area of pay drivers, as we're now calling them, and we have had pay drivers in Formula One throughout most of its history, quite honestly, we do have to be a little bit careful in terms of diminishing what sorts of actual merit there may well be there in terms of signing somebody like Sirotkin. We mentioned he's a winner in Formula 2. Many drivers have won races in Formula 2. Romain Grosjean, for instance, is a Formula 2 champion, GP2 at the time, but same difference. Success in lower formulas does not always translate into success in Formula One. Now, of course, we have outliers on both sides of that spectrum. Lewis Hamilton was extremely good in the lower formulas, and now he's a four-time world champion. Michael Schumacher, in the past, again, very similar. Success in lower formulas, and then became the most successful Formula One driver of all time. However, somebody like Romain Grosjean, no wins. Again, he hasn't been in the fastest cars, but should the best drivers sort of find their way into the best cars? That's certainly possible. But somebody like Sirotkin, labeling him a pay driver, which he certainly is. Let's be careful about this, because one has to look at history to find out that somebody like Niki Lauda started his Formula One career as a pay driver, yes, all the way back in the early 70s. He got his drives by negotiating personal sponsorship deals with banks in Austria and then approaching team principals and saying, look, I'm going to put this name on the car, they're going to pay you X per race, and basically you're going to take that money out of whatever you would have paid me and put it back into the team. So Niki Lauda, a three-time world champion, started his Formula One career as what we would now call a pay driver. So let's not diminish pay drivers simply because they're pay drivers and they're not necessarily there strictly on merit. Of course, in the case of Niki Lauda, he certainly did have the merit to be in Formula One, and Enzo Ferrari noticed it almost immediately and signed him almost immediately. But that's beside the point. Somebody like Sirotkin, it's not like he is truly untried and untested. He's been in the lower formulas. He has proven himself to be successful, at least on occasion, in the lower formulas. So to say that he's not entirely deserving of the drive, I don't believe is accurate. However, on the flip side, we need to look at the fact that Williams have not completely disposed of Robert Kubica. They have signed him to be their test reserve / simulator driver for 2018. So Kubica did sign a deal with Williams. It's just not a race seat, it's a development seat. So Kubica, we could expect him perhaps to drive the car in some FP1 or FP2 sessions this year. Obviously, behind the scenes, he'll be involved with simulator work, as on-track testing is pretty much non-existent these days. And certainly, you could expect to hear stories of Kubica being at the Williams factory working on new components and then working that up in the simulator and then being at the racetrack as well. We'll probably see him in the Williams garage. We'll probably see him on the Williams pit wall, maybe even involved in the Grand Prix themselves. So time will tell in terms of what actually will be the role of Robert Kubica. But I think it is telling in the fact that Williams didn't just tell him to bugger off and have a nice day, that they have actually signed him for a role. Now, we can go back to the initial question of, was Kubica just as fast, if not faster, as Sirotkin? We may never truly know the answer to that question. But I've got a hypothesis on this. It would have been the best story in recent memory if Robert Kubica managed to sign to race for Williams or for any team, because it would be arguably the greatest comeback in Formula One history. Talking about Niki Lauda again, after his big accident at the Nürburgring where the car burst into flames, he was burned well over 60% of his body, and he came back to finish the season and fight for the World Championship, lost it by half a point. That was such a cool story. People still talk about the 1976 season. The movie Rush was made about the 1976 season. James Hunt, Niki Lauda. Lauda's struggle to come back and develop that Ferrari and fight for the championship, despite all of his personal struggles. I mean, we still talk about 1976 because of that story of humanity. Williams missed a big chance to score political brownie points, not only with Formula One, but with all of the fans around the world and with tons of media organizations who would have followed that story if Robert Kubica, after suffering a massive life-changing injury, were able to come back and race in Formula One. Williams missed that opportunity. And I think they have missed a big opportunity for publicity from that as well, perhaps attracting sponsors and things of that nature, perhaps even to grow the overall scope and reach of Formula One. However, they're trying to save face by keeping him on staff. Now, have Williams realized that they perhaps have made a slight political miscalculation by not giving Kubica the race seat? It's possible. It certainly is a possibility. I haven't heard anything to that effect, but it's just personal speculation on my part. And are they trying then to save face by saying, no, he does drive for us, technically speaking? I don't know. Then we go back to the second principal question in all of this. Was it for Sirotkin's money? I think the answer to that has to be yes, unequivocally, because Kubica did not have the sort of financial backing that Sirotkin does. There were talks at the end of November and the beginning of December of last year of Kubica trying to get a sponsorship package together to present to Williams. We did hear about that in the media, and I don't really know how that developed, but certainly he was not able to garner as many funds as Sirotkin certainly was. Therefore, I do think that on the face of it, we can say that Sirotkin has been signed for the money first. However, I do not want to diminish the very real potential that Sirotkin does have to be a good racer. Be that as it may, Sirotkin will be partnering Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll has only done 1 year in Formula One. For all intents and purposes, he is still basically a rookie. Last year, with Stroll and Massa in the team, Massa at that point was the most experienced driver on the grid. He'd been in Formula One in some capacity really since 2002. So Massa certainly had a lot of experience and a lot of brain trust to be able to lend not only to Lance Stroll but to Williams in general. With Felipe Massa now officially retired, and it seems like it's going to stick this time, Williams have lost that direction on the driver front. They now have to rely entirely on Lance Stroll, this young guy with only 1 year under his belt, himself a pay driver, to lead Williams from the driving front. Of course, Williams still have all of their brain trust behind the scenes. Frank Williams is still around, Claire Williams still the team principal, but in terms of the driver side of it, Williams now have the most inexperienced lineup on the grid. You've got a driver with 1 season under his belt, and then you have an all-out rookie in the second car. Does Williams understand that this is going to put them at a significant disadvantage on the driver front? Undoubtedly they do understand this, and undoubtedly they have planned for this. But I do have to wonder, though, have they made a miscalculation? Somebody like Kubica, for argument's sake, and only for argument's sake, let's say that his performance has been compromised a little bit due to how he's had to readapt himself after his injury. Okay, so be it, but let's be utilitarian for a moment and think about how many chassis are going to be cracked up by Sirotkin and Stroll this year. Stroll, certainly, in winter testing last year, he did show a somewhat of a proclivity to crash. We saw that in Barcelona, I don't exactly remember what week it was, but he did have a big accident. He wrecked the car, they had to rebuild it, that sort of thing. And Stroll has been a bit inconsistent with his race performances in 2017. He had one inspired drive in Baku where he managed to finish third, only just. However, he hasn't really set the world alight. Sirotkin completely untried in Formula One. As far as I'm aware, he's only really driven the car on 2 occasions. We don't really know what he's going to do. Had Kubica been in that seat, okay, assuming that his performance is compromised, maybe he's going to be a little bit slow, at least in the beginning. But he's going to be more consistent at very least. I would say that Kubica has much less of a chance of cracking up race cars than somebody like even Lance Stroll, let alone Sergey Sirotkin, who's still very much an X factor in this. Maybe he's a prodigy, who knows, but I don't think so. Is that investment in Sirotkin, with all the sponsorship dollars and contractual dollars that he's going to bring in, going to offset any difficulties that they have in either testing or on the race weekends themselves with potential crashes or potential reliability problems as well? That remains to be seen. However, I'm not entirely sure if Williams have made the right decision, and I'm not entirely sure if they even agree that they've made the right decision or not. Be all of that as it may, the 2018 Formula One driver lineup is now finalized. Williams were the last team to confirm their driver lineup for this year, and now they have done so. Lance Stroll and Sergey Sirotkin, with Robert Kubica in that test and development role. So, the next thing that's going to happen for 2018 is the launches of all of the new cars. We should start to see them at the end of January and the beginning of February, and obviously by winter testing once that gets started up. However, it's going to be all change this year. Of course, the aero regulations and the general formula are going to remain mostly unchanged. Shark fins and T-wings are going away, but the overall design of the cars will be more or less unchanged. We can expect some logical evolutionary development work to be occurring across all of the teams up and down the grid. However, the biggest story on the technical front for this year is definitely the introduction and the integration of Halo. That's another X factor in all of this. Talking about Sirotkin being an X factor, Halo is also an X factor. That is subject matter for an entirely different day and an entirely different discussion. But the appearances of all the cars are going to be greatly altered due to the integration of that Halo device, and of course we can all talk about that at a later date. But I just wanted to talk about what Williams have done. It is Sergey Sirotkin driving the second car this year for Williams Grand Prix Engineering. So hopefully all of you enjoyed that, and we'll be doing some more of these podcasts as the preseason continues to unfold, and certainly when we start to see the new cars in their launch spec, we're going to take an in-depth look at all of those. But just thought I could share some thoughts on all of that with you. Please do tell me what you think of the whole situation. Until next time, I'd like to thank all of you very much for listening. Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you, and we will see you soon.